Hey, Charlie, have you heard that according to research by intelligent.com, that approximately 75% of companies who have hired recent Gen Z college graduates ages 27 and under have found them to be unsatisfactory workers?
What the alpha, man?
Yeah.
You know what else I've heard? Gen Z is expected to outnumber baby boomer workers in the US by the end of this year. And then Gen Z feels like they are unfairly stereotyped by employers according to the Inc.com research.
Yeah, isn't Gen Z the one that coined that phrase, okay, boomer? That usually signifies a dismissive attitude towards someone perceived as being too old or out of touch with modern culture, and is also often used to dismiss opinions without engaging in serious debate. And is that the one they're now kvetching about being unfairly stereotyped? Well, I think that's a big what the effa is up with that.
Welcome to the Job Ready podcast. I am Charlie, the entrepreneur.
I'm Jeff, the brand guy.
And I remain Professor James.
Well, if this is your first time listening to us, our Job Ready podcast is dedicated to, job readiness. We're bringing to you our thought leaders, business leaders, innovators, you name it, who are directly and positively driving job readiness for the early career workforce.
That's right. And in terms of early career, when 1 in 7 companies is actually planning on not hiring from Gen Z next year, and just like my brother Charlie there said earlier, I haven't seen the same research you've seen, Charlie, but I'll tell you what I did see. I saw that by 2032, in terms of this age cliff and the boomers retiring, 1 in 3 workers is going to be Gen Z. So if we're not going to hire Gen Z and 1 in 3 roles needs to be filled by Gen Z, Houston, we have a problem.
Indeed.
Well, there's an AI for that, but that's not my position. But speaking as a professor, I have met a few Gen Z folks, and even though there are some people that might think of them as a new species, it still remains our job to educate and help prepare students for the realities of the modern workforce. Yet, more research is still needed on the best way to do that.
That is correct. Well, Jeff, why don't you get us started and introduce our guest for today's episode?
Of course, it's most definitely my pleasure to introduce Huy Nguyen. Huy is the Chief Education and Career Advisor at Intelligent, founder at the Growth Hack Inc., and the co-founder of Solve Community Challenges, Solve CC, where he's pioneered a transformative approach to higher education. He enables colleges and universities to really deeply engage students with their communities through collaborative experiential learning. And he serves as a business and career advisor for the Newport Mesa Unified School District's Career Technical Education Program, George Washington University's Digital Marketing Certificate Program. Most recently, you've probably heard him because he's been speaking about this groundbreaking research on Gen Z in the workforce almost everywhere. Major magazines like Newsweek, TV news like Fox News. Huy, such a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, guys.
Man. Hey.
And I have to say though, Jeff, just that you missed one, and I shared this with Huy on LinkedIn. His research actually made its way to Vietnam in Vietnamese language. How impressive is that? I was reading the article in Vietnamese, and I read this one in English as well. So there you go. Huy and Intelligent.com have gone global. How's that?
Yeah, I actually shared that with my parents, who were refugees from the Vietnam War, and they were amazed. They said, this is crazy that they knew that some of the things that we were already doing in the U.S., but to see it translated over to Vietnamese, I think it just kind of hit home for them. So that was a very proud moment for me, above and beyond all the other ones.
Congrats.
Thanks for sharing that, Charlie, because I actually had no idea, but you shared that with me. That made my day.
Well, I mean, you deserve it, Huy. It's great work as a parent. In fact, all parents, you've all probably noticed out there that sheltering in place and the pandemic had tremendous impact on your kids. We're talking Gen Z, Gen Alpha, right? During pandemic, and it had impact on their neurological processes. So when we're looking at statistics like 1 in 7 companies planning not to hire Gen Z next year because of their experiences, and what is it? It was like 60% of businesses who have hired Gen Z in the past year have had to fire an employee from Gen Z. These are really stark statistics. The onset of AI, all the fear about the workforce, the retiring of the boomer generation. I mean, Gen Z can't be all bad, and they're coming out of a really challenging situation. So maybe the intergenerational experience in the workplace is challenging right now. There's probably some negatives. There's also probably some strengths as well that you've noticed, right, Huy? Can you just kind of ground us in the audience with what you've learned?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that first and foremost, if you can remember when you started your career, every generation has always kind of stereotyped and had negative perceptions about the incoming generation. So, first it was millennials. And if you go back and actually just do a Google search and you type in the word millennial and lazy and entitled, I guarantee you'll see hundreds of articles popping up. And it mirrors very similarly to what you're seeing right now with Gen Z and the stereotypes there. You touched on one thing that was extremely important. The pandemic, everybody was forced to go remote, work from home, do distance learning. I think that really kind of magnified the effect that's affecting this generation right now. So they had to, learn from home, couldn't see their professors' faces in some case, but most importantly, they didn't have that in-person interaction with their peers or other people. They didn't have internship opportunities where they can go and work in person. They had less opportunities to actually be in an environment where they're learning practical and soft skills as well. A lot of times people call those soft skills like communication, project management. In reality, those are human skills. Those are skills that we need to interact regardless of work with each other and collaborate. Just really growing up with a phone in their hand, this just kind of magnified all of it, right? So these guys are used to communicating through phone, through text, through a variety of different messaging platforms that are out there. It's not the same as kind of like how it was 10 years ago when everybody was communicating face to face. Let's have a meeting, sending an email and just following the email string. They carry different attitudes and different preferences as they enter the workplace. And so that can be a really big point of contention as they enter a new environment.
Hey, I have to ask you this. I mean, it's, all these stats. What prompted you in Intelligent.com to conduct this research? And what do you hope to be the impact as a result of these insights that you guys share?
Yeah, I kind of, the big motivation around this is that a lot of people talk about how Gen Z or just people that are recent grads entering the workforce are not ready, right? And so for me as a business owner and entrepreneur for decades, I think that I've always had, I've always looked for opportunities to go back and, when I was a kid, I wish I had this, right? And so that is the big motivation to kind of go back and rather than just continue to foster some of these stereotypes or just, have these conversations, I wanted to figure out a way to actually participate prior to people going and leaving education and going into the workforce. So about 10 years ago, we engaged with, different schools, try to bring in industry and the business community and do a collaborative effort in order to prepare people for the future of work. So what Intelligent actually does is we survey about 1,000 businesses on a weekly basis on a variety of different topics. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is prepare future leaders and people that are in school or considering going into higher ed. We're trying to prepare them for the future of work. So a lot of times these jobs, if you think about the jobs that exist today, they didn't exist 10 years ago. And the jobs of the future are, they currently don't exist right now. So at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is provide resources, provide exposure, and really help people understand how to be, self-reliant, be responsible for their own future, and really kind of build that resilience so that no matter what comes into the future, that they're prepared for it.
I wonder if Gen X that I'm a part of and, the millennial generation, if they're really prepared for jobs of the future right now, or if Gen Z, who's growing up with time shift conversations and the notion of native AI is more prepared despite anything else that these other generations might say. I mean, what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes both ways. A lot of times when we're coming into the workforce right now and Gen Z, they're probably the most highly technically skilled workers entering the workforce right now. They've got access to information in the palm of their hand. There's so many different types of channels and avenues that they can actually consume content on and learn. So having instant access to information is definitely one thing that I would say that, Gen Z has going for them. And then on the other side is that, Gen X and people that are getting they're getting older in the workforce, they also need to change as well. There's new technology coming about, there's changes. People are going through this, there's a buzzword out there, it's called digital transformation, right? So all the things that we used to do, all the processes that we used to have in place, especially for larger organizations, they're looking for ways to modernize those processes. And it's these newer talent that's coming in right now that is adaptable, that is not married to the way that things have always been done, that is not conforming to the same kind of traditional workplace norms. Those people can actually be true change agents for any organization that's out there. So I think that it's important to recognize that while their attitudes are different, some of their values are different, that it's imperative that, we look for opportunities where they can help drive business success overall. A lot of times we've been so comfortable being in an organization doing things a certain way is sometimes we can be resistant to change because this is not the way that we've seen it work before, and it's been successful the way that we've continued to do it. But in the future, every organization, every business, every industry does change. And so, capitalizing on the talent and the views and different perspectives that are coming into an organization, I think that is going to really contribute to overall success for a business.
Not only the pandemic as a major influence and inflection point, but we can't ignore the rise and continual propagation of social media on a daily basis. And I totally agree with you that we need to be open to new, fresh ideas, and we need to innovate, and we need to have these multiplicity of perspectives. And at the same time, the notion of interacting and critical thinking is something that higher education, I believe that we've got to really push to be sure that if they graduate from an institution with a diploma, that problem solving, collaboration, and critical thinking is really what they've internalized rather than just the subject matter.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that one of the things that, is a big differentiator, there's a stat that's out there that over 48% of businesses and corporations have actually removed the college degree requirement. And part of that is that, there's a lot of theoretical knowledge and learning that happens in college, but they don't have that practical experience to go out and make them job ready. It's quite challenging, I would say, for, institutions in higher ed to engage with the business community and get people work ready. One of the most important things I think about resilience is letting people fail, right? And in college and in these classrooms, what you have is you have a syllabus, you have guidelines on what it takes to get the top grade. And in reality, everything's kind of laid out step by step. You know the path, you know what you need to do to succeed. So I say that being that, it's difficult if they don't have that practical experience, or they don't have that experience to, go out and try things and fail, or have adversity into some of their ideas that happen actually in the real world. You mentioned problem solving. I mean, those are key. Just imagine when they go out, and that was some of the results from our survey as well, is people don't have the ability to problem solve or deal with conflict, right? They've never had to experience that. Their entire life has been structured up until they went into the workforce. It's always been, you do these things and you're going to get graded on it, and you have to get a good grade because, that's how you succeed. But in reality, I think that, providing experiential learning opportunities where they can actually learn practical skills, putting them in environments where they're going to be challenged, where it's okay and they have the possibility to fail and pivot and make things right. Those opportunities can really be, a good effort in addition to the theoretical learning that they learn in college.
Your point on that is refreshing in the sense that I never realized it to the way that you laid out in the college journey. Everything is spelled out, right? The calendar, the number of credits, and the syllabus, and deadlines and midterms and all. Everything is laid out for you, which is quite contrary to what in the real workplace, where you have to be critical thinking about things. You have to ask questions. You have to be proactive. You have to problem solve. And the way you position it, none of that is actually being taught in a school. Earlier this year, Inc. put out a similar piece, not quite the same angle you guys did, but here's what they said. Gen Z feels they are unfairly stereotyped by employers. Gen Z does have a dream job. Gen Z values people over technology in their ideal role. And they feel at times unrealistic expectations from employers. And so it's almost in some way counterpoint some of the negative perception out there about them, right? I mean, well, I'll come back to the point that Jeff mentioned earlier is they can probably teach the current workforce quite a bit because they are digital natives. There's probably a lot of things that, Gen actually like myself, that's not innate. I have to learn a lot of these things because they're new technology. So I'd love to get your reaction to some of those things first, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that a lot of Gen Z does feel that they have unrealistic expectations as they enter the workforce. They're expected to understand business etiquette. They're expected to understand how to work in a collaborative environment. A lot of those things are not things that are taught in school, right? And a lot of those things, I think that with Gen Z, they value a lot more. They have their own personal values. They have certain things that they want to do. They want to work for companies that share those personal values. I think that especially during the time that we were in COVID, a lot of these companies actually shared publicly their values, right? They got involved with social causes, social issues, even on the political side. So I think that as these companies were demonstrating some of that and just the access to information on social media, people were seeing their peers in also being able to express their values. They had that expectation of kind of going into a company, in any company, right? Because we only see a few handful of those things as we witness the content. But as they go into some of these other traditional companies that may not, be so big on kind of sharing personal values at work or, more focused on having that separation, I think it can be quite a shock, right, to them, where they're seeing their peers going out there and being able to share, their dream job. I had a conversation the other day and we were talking about this, there was a lot of content with the rise of TikTok of people sharing, this one video comes to mind, but there was a girl that was sharing, this is my day in my life as a $2,000 a year product manager at, big tech company. I'm not going to say the name, but it was just like, yeah, get up at 9 o'clock in the morning, come in there for work, have breakfast, have a meeting at 10 o'clock, go to my yoga, and then it seemed like that throughout their entire day, they only worked for about 15 minutes. Some of those things where we talked about access to information and just getting content from a variety of people, that type of content maybe drove some unrealistic expectations for them coming into working for big tech companies, right? So you can be quite shocking when, common sense would say that, that's not real work, right? And so I think that those types of expectations coming in, they may feel a certain way about the companies not living up to their expectations of, being able to just kind of live that life.
It's interesting that you bring up that kind of example.
Mm-hmm.
We've pivoted, at least in my institution and program, we deal in digital arts and sciences, but experiential learning and failure is big part of what we're doing. Is like, it's okay. We tell them it's okay to fail now. You can screw up and you're not going to lose your job, but go out there and make the efforts. And yet at the same time, I've noticed, especially right after the pandemic, that a lot of the students that would come into class on Zoom instead of into the room would leave their cameras off, of course. And, and I observed, because I got into their Discord channel, that they were all on Discord behind the scenes in class, talking about all sorts of stuff that didn't have anything to do with the class.
It's called multitasking, Professor James. Multitasking.
Right. Right. Okay. And so multitasking, which typically means doing a lot of stuff badly, but then one time in particular, let's just say that it was Susie, I actually had the unmitigated gall to call on, hey, Susie, what do you think about what I was just talking about? Silence. And then in all caps, he just called on me. Like I had no right to, call on her. And so again, the unrealistic expectation thing, that's something that we actually have to work with, which is not to say that they shouldn't be on Discord, multitasking and learning to do different things. But at the same time, when you're with people live, this is really interactive, what we're doing here. the word interactive got to mean, oh, I'm working with a computer on something or three things at once. It's an interactive thing. This is interaction. And to get back to your point, communication is a human need, right? Not just a business thing. And the more that we can urge them to join clubs and be a part of real life civic things, I think that helps prepare them to be not only good corporate citizens and employees, but citizens overall.
Well, Professor James, I think that entitlement is not the sole province of Gen Z. I know plenty of entitled people, and entitlement is just that's a huge problem for everybody. And so when I look at data like, here's what the employers think. It was like 1,000 companies, 1,000 people were managers were surveyed for your research, Huy. So it's big time formal research. It shows the perspective from the standpoint of the people who are already in the companies, right? So, like we can get the impression that somehow the companies will have to compromise in order to bring Gen Z into the workplace, but that's not it either, right? It's everything we've been talking about here today. There are particular strengths that Gen Z has. There are tactics that any company needs to execute in order to increase retention, to increase job readiness. So what is a company going to do? You've been talking to people. I know I learn a lot the most when I'm talking with people about stuff that I know. I actually start observing like these facts and questioning, what do you think we have to do for that integration?
Yeah, I think that's hugely important. It is about integration. It's not just necessarily singling out Gen Z, right? It's easy for us to kind of jump on to the bandwagon and say Gen Z's lazy, entitled, right? It's easy because we've been there before. We said the same thing about millennials. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I think it is about respect, right? So I think it's about having some self-awareness and having some respect. And then on the other side, from the employers, I think that not singling out Gen Z or new hires as they are the problem, but in reality, we also need to balance that on the other side, is how do our current workers and our current employees, how does our current culture, how does it support innovation? How does it support new ideas? Because we know, as we've talked about, this is all hugely important, for success of a business. But I think that it goes both ways. It's not just about singling out Gen Z and new workers and saying, hey, you guys need to conform to these traditional norms that we have. But if you can imagine, on the other side, there's also managers that are managing Gen Z, and it's difficult for them because, they carry different attitudes, different values that are coming in, but they possess these really strong technical skills that can actually be really good for the workforce. So if we continue to kind of just isolate Gen Z as the problem and we're resistant to change, we're going to go into this cycle that's just going to be over and over and over again, and everyone's going to be frustrated.
What you're saying, Huy, is the current managers and the current employees need to stop bitching and complaining about Gen Z and doing more to accommodate, doing more to bring them into the fold. Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is people need to stop being managers and they just need to be more of like coaches and mentors, right? We've all been new to the workforce before. So I'll give an example for myself, right? Coming into the corporate environment, very young, I wasn't allowed to go on YouTube. We had restrictions. I couldn't use my phone at work. But if you think about the norms that we kind of have now, we obviously went from being very restrictive, using a company laptop, not being able to access certain sites, to now we're in a world where we have access to all these tools and we think it's normal and it's making us so much more productive. But I also have that place in my heart where I feel that, just like Gen Z, we're being stereotyped for our behaviors. So I was a little bit rebellious. I went out and got my own phone. I went out and got my own laptop so that I can actually do things on YouTube. If we had the amount of visibility that we have now, I probably would have been fired. But in reality, I contributed that to my success as becoming one of the youngest executives at a Fortune 100 company.
The point there is well made there, Huy, because, one of our previous guests is Professor Antonio at the major university, and he changed my perspective. Like, perspective that he presented was, because we see work as in a cubicle. Well, work in today's world may not be in a cubicle. And just because whoever is not in the cubicle doesn't mean work isn't as productive. And we have to accommodate that, and we have to change and take advantage of it. And so the point there, I think, is well taken. I'd love for you to elaborate a little bit more on, in the 1,000+ companies you're talking to. I mean, what are some of the things that they're doing to be more welcoming, more accommodating? Because Gen Z is not going away.
Sure. I think that a lot of companies right now are reevaluating their onboarding training, right? So rather than just kind of showing people the different work processes and things like that, and from a formal perspective, they're also providing a little bit more support. They're providing peer mentors to help people guide for company success and provide mentorship. I kind of mentioned it before, is like, we really need to stop acting like managers as I'm the boss and, you work for me. I do believe that people that have direct reports ultimately really have the responsibility of coaching people to be successful in the business. So it's not just necessarily about being successful in that department, or these are the processes within the department, but spending a little bit more time to coach them. For a lack of a better word, we'll call it business etiquette, right? There's a lot of things that, rather than saying, here's the rules, but these are the types of thought processes. These are the types of things that you can change your mindset to become successful, not just in this organization, but successful, for the future at any organization that you work at.
Who owns that onboarding within the organization, right? Because I know, we've talked to a lot of business leaders on this podcast, as well as part of our other work with EFA as well. And it seems like, what we've heard is this: for the talent acquisition is typically the talent acquisition or the HR responsibility. And then once an individual starts on the job is the manager. But it seems like the onboarding space is kind of a gray area, because, and we've heard this literally from a couple of different talent acquisition leaders, is if an individual resigns within the first 3 months, that's the talent acquisition fault. Beyond that, that's the manager's fault. I mean, so the onboarding to me is sort of somewhere in the middle, in that early stage. Who owns that? And what have you seen as some of the kind of you got to check out this company for that practice?
Yeah, I think it does start with, the recruiters and talent acquisition. Right now, with this age of technology, you're probably getting more applicants than ever, right? People are using AI to tailor their resumes to match the job description. Companies are using AI to filter through resumes to try to match certain keywords in certain job descriptions. How does Gen Z differentiate from, anybody else who's applying? I think that we need to take that same approach from a talent acquisition standpoint and understand kind of beyond the resume, understand their potential, their motivation, the stories and the experiences that they've shared, whether it's directly related to, that particular area of work. A lot of times we're talking about entry-level employees here with Gen Z, right? People that are just getting ready to work. They don't have the same work experience. I think that, we do need to go beyond just what's on paper, and then really look at, the motivations, the experiences they've had, and, take that into consideration as their success within an organization. Professor James, in your institution, you teach a class, probably teach 1 or 2 subjects, but there's hundreds, if not thousands, of different teachers that are within that organization. Every teacher has a different way of teaching. Some people are motivated to help others. Some people are not, right? Some people are just kind of want to clock in and clock out. And I will just say that broadly. I'm not singling anybody out, but ultimately, I think that there is an individual responsibility as well, as if that person is the manager or the mentor, there does lie some responsibility there for them.
Yep, that's particularly well crafted and thoughtful, the way that you've linked the individuals, because we are all individuals. And for us to be sensitive to other individuals' particular style, sensibilities, etc., I believe is incumbent on those of us that are already here, whether in an institution or a business, to the success of those coming in. If a member of our audience wanted to learn more about your work at Intelligent or your thought leadership on Gen Z, what would you tell them to view, read, or to follow?
We try to survey 1,000 businesses every week on a variety of different topics. So I think that just go check us out, intelligent.com, pretty easy domain name to go and remember. But on top of that, if they want to connect with me on LinkedIn, I do more than just what my work at Intelligent. We actually have a nonprofit called Solve Community Challenges, which Jeff had mentioned in the beginning. But with this nonprofit, what we're trying to do is we're trying to prepare students and people that are about to graduate with opportunities for experiential learning, not just within their institution, but actually it's called community challenges. We're looking for students to recognize, research, and engage with their community to find issues or problems or things that are worth solving. And being within that community, you're engaging everybody from local businesses to teachers, families. A lot of times we work with community colleges, which I think is a really good opportunity for people who are interested in entrepreneurship, because you not only live there, you work there, you're part of the community, and you have all the, you have all of the stakeholders involved. What we're trying to do is just to provide a platform where we can link all of those together. So check out solvecc.org. And then the last thing I'm going to plug is that we're actually running a Future of Work challenge that's open to all college students in the United States. This is a free competition that you can compete for prizes, monetary prizes. That's not the most important thing, but it just helps us to get out there. But we're partnered up with with NACI, which is the organization that's actually helping to sponsor this. And they're giving $1,000 prize as well to the winners of this. It's a short video competition. Imagine what work would look like in the future in a 2-minute video with no boundaries. Jobs of tomorrow don't exist today. So tell us what you'd like to do. That's it.
Cool. That sounds awesome. I want to know more about that. Hey, so is that through Intelligent or SolveCC?
That's through SolveCC.
That sounds great. Huy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
All right. Thanks, Huy. On behalf of Job Ready Podcast, this is Charlie, the entrepreneur.
Jeff, the brand guy.
And Professor James. And thanks to we of Intelligent and solvecc.org for sharing your important work and your really inspiring work that you're doing. And I'm going to be sure to let some of my college students know about the competition that you just talked about the video, because I believe they would really be interested too.
Big gratitude and respect to all of you guys out there listening to us. Thanks a lot for joining us on the Job Ready podcast, which is now the EFA podcast. We're super stoked about that. You can find us on effa.io/job ready. So hope you guys have a great week wherever you are.
That's it, folks. We are EFA. Over and out.